So you two are okay with being recorded?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's start this then.
Okay. You good?
Whatever. Alright, let me go to my email.
Alright. Framing morality must be binding and universal nature of normativity. Internal is offense because individuals' motives are universalizable. Internal cannot motivate actions since internal rules have no relation to our motives. Only constitutivism solves creates universally binding normative claims by appealing to the constituents of an agent. Consequence 1 states constitutivism sublates internals and externals, agreeing that the normative claim depends on the aims of constitutives. Traces authority to the aim of the constitutive of being an agent. The constitutive aim is not optional. If you like the agent, you don't know. Put differently, there are reasons for acting that arise merely from the fact that one is an agent. Specifically, with only the will to power produces non-optional reasons for acting. Consequence 2 states process directly involved activity involved involves active desire to encounter and overcome resistance to view aim to engage in some process. You must seek the objects upon which a process can be directed. Each of those will to overcome that has no end. The will to power can manifest itself only against resistances. Therefore, seeks that which resists it. It takes out case and frameworks that don't consider the will to power. The act is a prerequisite to any action that takes place to begin with, since it defines what it means to complete an action. The standard is framing the will to power. The independent warrants 1. The will to power does not impose any absolute good, but rather filters out how we achieve our own subjective values. Has in 11 states. Tradition has ceased to carry any meaningful moral weight. Individuals are not freely drifting into open seas of morality. Nature was disturbing the need for reorientation of moral authority and personal purpose. Moral meaning was not created from within nature. Was the will to power was endorsed by evaluation life. The will to power was a constructed doctrine to distinguish one of the unity individuals to overcome their most basic instincts to achieve their true human potential. It means to self-control, not the infliction of pain on others. Nietzsche's metaphorical enigma has been exploded for terror. To incriminate Nietzsche would be based on a species' understanding of its philosophy. It takes out Kant's modernity, lacks a unified moral compass, means that grand theories like Afro-pessimism inevitably fail. 2. Empirical evidence proves that overcoming resistance is the most psychologically fulfilling. Consequence 6 states. Recent psychological research strongly supports humans that beings are most satisfied when engaging in challenges. Enjoyment comes whenever the opportunities for action are equal to their capabilities. The most satisfying situations were when those in which all relevant skills are needed. Athletes want to play teams that present a talent. Scientists want to discover new truth, not go over truth already discovered. That hijacks util. 3. Only constitutivism can justify normative authority since it doesn't appeal to external standards of judgment. Consequence 7 states. Normative claims such as you should obey the speed limit can invoke financial penalties, danger and so on, but these are external standards. The standard of checkmate doesn't rely on these external features. We can answer the question by referring to the activities constitutive aim. Constitutive standards are internal to the activities they regulate. We need not invoke external facts to legitimate authority offense. Agnostic democracy protects domination in favor of fair competition. That's the key to the will to power, since I need others in order to overcome. Hatabo 2 states. This helps form an intentional relationship with others. An element of my other would be an element of myself. Any victory demands enable opponents such as a logical competition, which might include active provisions for helping people in politics become more able participants. Respect for the other as other can respect without ignoring the politics and politics agreement. Positive rights as requisite for fair competition and political discourse. Political life must engage in balancing act negotiating tensions. 1. This quote destroys agnostic democracy, bringing in inherent fear of the unknown of people into countries with diseases. Harris et al. States. Many look at long-term debilitating effects are passive current infections of diseases called long-term disability. Stigmatization, particularly true with individuals associated with personal responsibility or disease, and believed to be a treatable result of disappearing fear of people who are different in fear of the disease coinciding. To infected people become marginalized by such stigma, and that significantly increases the suffering as well as making it more difficult to seek treatment. Already disadvantaged communities. This fear of the unknown is rooted in longing for security, which is the value to life, making conflict and authorization inevitable. Dairy in 98 states. A possible to power for like conventions of security act suppress rather than confront fears. Desire for security is a collective resentment of difference. The desire for certainty produces a domesticated life. No evokes hostility. Resentment. The desire for security creates people who are willing to subordinate informative values to the extent of the necessities of security. 2. And the school is based on hierarchical domination that destroys any meaningful arguments. Wealthy nations exploit poor ones through disease. Education. 14 states. Proponents of nonsense are not a good thing. Homeopaths and naturopathic chiropractors that shun international boundaries do harm. Groups have encouraged midwives in Kenya to use homeopathy during difficult deliveries. Homeopaths have discouraged poor people have encouraged poor people to take natural remedies for malaria, cholera, and typhoid. The U.S. are exporting their harmful message to developing nations. So the plan will nations have an obligation to conduct research on infectious diseases of developing countries as development assistance. The laws are agnostic democracy where people are able to affirm their will to power. Mission 14 states. Research is disproportionately focused on diseases that affect wealthy countries. The rich countries obviously produce much more research. The world's poor and double jeopardy experiencing the highest burden for diseases that are studying the least. Authors suggest new strategies spreading the medical advantages of the developed world to lower income areas. Distributed research would increase studies on underserved diseases. Wealthy nations are key. Common states. Research into the diseases affecting developing countries is expensive. One of the forms of assistance that developed countries give to developing countries. Foster the conduct of appropriate research. Common continues. In developed countries, the capacity to conduct this research is limited. The lack of appropriate infrastructure, expertise, and resources are major constraints. Research refocuses out on chronic impacts of infectious disease to suffer stigmatization and increase effective disease prevention. Harris et al. States, research can mitigate the consequences of chronic infection and its associated stigma. Chronic burdens are disregarded and underestimated. The impact on the quality of life and economics are not captured by indices that focus on mortality data rather than chronic morbidity. Research considers the long-term effects of chronic conditions can help manage such conditions more effectively and identify practical solutions that address stigmatization and marginalization. And research is the first step to policy change. Harris states. Policymakers need access to the right information at the right time to inform decisions of health policy bodies and health system. Many opportunities to make a serious difference on global health are missed. One of the critical reasons is the effectiveness of the link between research and policy. Research that provides data needs to be readily available. The best evidence is essential. Research plays a key role in the decision-making process. On the role of the ballot, I'll send this later. The role of the ballot is to evaluate the desirability of the plan versus the status quo or competitive policy option. A, anything else is self-serving and arbitrary because it presumes the importance of other impacts. And B, simulation is educational inculcates advocacy skills, creates possibility for alternative futures. Wimbush 8 states, analyzing scenarios is how she suggests alternative futures might arise. Or scenarios are stories of what different futures may look like. Scenarios are tools that can help bring order to the way analysts think about security environments. Analysts can build heading strategies for dealing with problems. Okay. Wait. I'll send that. I'll just like resend the doc.
Can I start CX while you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to the framing. So agonism is like the rejection of domination. Where does Hatab indicate that there is like that the affirmative, or rather, I'm sorry. So Hatab indicates. So Hatab is tagged that agonistic democracy's purpose is to reject domination. Where does Hatab indicate that agonistic democracy does not wish for hegemony to exist?
So Hatab talks about a agonistic democracy where people's like differences are able to be recognized. So we are able to reframe our moral values.
So agonistic democracy as like a thesis is like there should be equal interaction and respect for the voices of others, and like voices should be recognized in like political communities, right? So how does the plan text, besides preventing death, lead to like the increasing like hearing of oppressed voices?
So 2 ways. So the first point is the first Harris et al. Card, I think, which talks about how right now in the status quo, we fear, or developed countries fear diseases of people of developing countries.
So they fear diseases, which
that means in the next card, Darian 98, that it's rooted in a longing for security, okay, and that destroys the value to life. So conflict and otherization are inevitable. And that would definitely
Okay, so let's go to the Dardarian evidence. Where does this indicate anything related to so this evidence is from 1998. It seems like this is a syllogism that is missing an internal link. Why does fear of diseases indicate, or stigmas against diseases indicate complete fear of the unknown?
Okay, so it's saying that desire of security means that we are suppressing people.
Yeah, so I think that the indication and discussions of security probably deals with things like terrorism and stuff like that. Why is that relevant for the fear of death? No, it's security and security as in we want to know what things are happening. So if we have fear of the unknown, that is why do diseases cause
Sure, that's the Harris et al. Card.
Yeah. So I'm saying, where's the warrant in Harris? Can you read me a line from, or lines from the evidence where it says that?
Okay, chronic diseases cause stigmatization.
So stigmatization is not the same thing as fear of holistic fear of the unknown. It seems like there's a massive internal link that is necessary between fear of diseases, which seems like a rational just natural stigmatization, right? We're afraid to die.
It talks about how the stigmatization means that we don't address the issues, and that is the unknown, because in the status quo, because
I don't understand why stigmatization leads to security and in the sense of exclusion.
Right. So it talks about specifically that stigmatization means that they increase suffering and they aren't able to get treatment anymore because more difficult to obtain treatment.
Okay. Starting prep now. Whew.
Are you going to use this?
Yes, please. 3:30 left. Sending the doc. Okay, let me know when y'all have it. Order's gonna be 3 off. First 2 off for shells. So that's that. There's also a framework in the K. I don't know if you want to follow that just actually or whatever, but it is there. Yeah, usually. I don't know. My internet sucks, so it always takes like an extra amount of time, but I promise you'll get it. This happens every round. Okay. Everyone good? You have it, Lawrence? AC interpretation and tournaments receiving an octopus has been debaters must on the page with their name and the school they attend. Disclose all previously read positions on the NDCA wiki at least 30 minutes before the round. Piece of violation, their wiki is completely blank. I have screenshots here that it benefits versus research. Disclosure increases research and gets rid of any individual arguments because the debaters are forced to prepare cases knowing that people have answers and that people get the opportunity to research answers to disclosed cases. Nails 13. Disclosure stream much research. The wiki provides a public body of knowledge that everyone can contribute to and build off of. Disclosure motivates research. Debaters can expect to make it a whole topic without the same AC or with the same AC. Debaters with access to the bonus case can do more targeted and specific research. Disclosure weeds out any educational arguments and theory spectrum in a level playing field to each side and equal time to craft answers that would seldom win around just as testimony the real world. Applicability of such strategies debates are much more substantive, developed, and responsible. Both sides know what they're getting into prior to the round. Research skills are better because it's key to our ability A, to actually learn about the topic and become engaged with the real world, and B, process large amounts of information with a necessary portable skill in the digital age. Don't get into arguments about small schools or any other cop-out disclosures. The binding issue in this massively disadvantages me. I tried to contact her on Facebook, but she didn't reply until like 5 minutes before the round. The neg is completely, the shell with this, she did reply like 5 minutes before the round, just send me the plain text. The neg is completely blind coming into the round. She's reading a Nietzsche framework and a unique plain text, also doesn't resolve the inter. Second is clash. Disclosure is the best method for increasing clash because it allows debaters to substantially engage position with the prep. It also allows for more specific clash because debaters can see specific arguments and close themselves trying to link generic arguments. That's about it because A, specific education helps our ability to learn about the topic and engage with the real world. B, clash is key to advocacy skills since it forces us to defend positions against specific problems. Drop the debater on 3 first. It's the same as dropping the argument in this case since the argument is the entire case. It wasn't closed. Second, drop the debater specifically for not disclosing cases. Then we to rectify the beast going enforcing this goes now. 1 fix. The lack of education competing interrupts because reasonably arbitrary and allows for judge intervention. Sets the best more for the base on RVS because first you shouldn't win proving lodging a possible otherwise both sides would win. Second, chilling effect these debaters not willing to check abuse, and the 3 allows debaters to be abusive to debate theory and then just win on it. Second off. AC interpretation, the affirmative must defend wealthy nations only as self-governed community people to clarify the act may not defend the use of governments or states as wealthy nations as a mechanism for providing developmental assistance to be a violation. They specify nations as governments and they presume that this is the this is just like the necessary internal link. See the standards? Textuality. The only thing we have coming around this binding resolution if the AF is defending the definition of resolution, then you vote them down. The affirmative defending a false definition of nations means that they have strayed away from our textually binding resolution. Additionally, textuality controls pre-round preparation because it's the only stasis point we have to guide research in case constructing nations is a conceptually distinct term from government, states, and sovereignties, Paul. Nation states may seem identical, but there are distinctions more than purely academic states, government, territory, boundary, they have laws, taxes, police, and armies. They claim sovereignty. Nations, by contrast, groups of people claiming common values like language, culture, and historical identity. Some nations have a state of their own, other ones state but do not have them. Tibetans and Palestinians, for example, they want to state but enjoy some autonomy. The Sioux nation within the boundaries of the U.S. Each of these nations has some special culture, but not state that some nations are large and states across state boundaries. Critical education. The affirmative race is the important distinction between nations and governments. Nations is a sacred term that specifically is used to define groups like the Sioux or indigenous groups, and we conflate nations to justify the invalidation of national groups instead. We view them as not the true governing bodies that they are, as well as rejecting whatever cultural norms they practice. In addition, this further justifies the only way to be a real member of an assemblage is to be ruled by a totalitarian state. Second is advocacy skills. The debate community is a common trend of utilizing the state as a default sole heuristic. This cultivates the immoral belief that all responsibility and feasible solutions are government-based. This undermines the ability to critically interrogate the plurality of ways we might collectively address social issues on the other LG topics. They give adequate opportunities to engage in government-based policy making. The resolution is a unique opportunity to utilize a different acronym and still be topical. We say that we can avoid the violent apparatus of the state by discovering political solutions grounded in the community. This turns her world about and turns her framing this based off the question of policy making because that already exists in every other topic we have ever had. This is an opportunity to disengage from that. Dear the voters. Drop the debate on T because first this is the only way to deter future abuse because drop the arguments to cop out for the affirmative. It doesn't deter the advocacy, you can just as easily win the round. Second, the F's advocacy is what generates violations, so dropping the argument in T is equivalent to dropping the debate because it leaves the F with no advocacy to leverage for a ballot story. Third off. Development is grounded in white supremacy, neurocentrism, and intrinsic to colonial notions of civilization. The inevitability and acceptance of development is universal, good marginalized into values, the existence of others, and creates the very notion of a third world. Gordon. Shrouded by discourse that portrays it as an invariably desirable practice, development is actually a set of practices and beliefs of Western culture specific to it. Development is not a transcultural concept. The ideas embedded within the development paradigm, such as progress, poverty, and modernization, are firmly rooted within Western thought. Development has to do with the process by which Euro-American assumptions are constructed as universal. This has become the exclusive standard for humankind. The West essentially produces other cultures. Eurocentrism organizes a system of thought and development. The development project continues to be shaped by Western elite to marginalize the knowledge of others. Development thus elevates the power of the West and creates the third world. All societies presume to transfix the same fixed and linear path. Western nations are the pinnacle, and the third world is necessarily subordinate to those at the apex. These were a natural extension of the colonial discourse that emphasized third inferiority and justified itself by paternal submission to civilize the natives. Development is a neo-colonial discourse. There is now a more imperative to intervene. The colonizer and the colonized continue. Those previously designated as uncivilized now the label of underdeveloped. Poverty is purely a Western construction, robbing communities of cultural ties to self-sufficiency and erasing their history. Gordon 2. The World Bank quantified poverty, annual per capita income below $100, 2/3 of global instantly impoverished. Global poverty became a comparative statistical operation. Entire nations were regarded as poor because they were well-income. Poor countries came to be defined as those lacking the wealth of more industrialized countries from the points of reference. Poverty itself is an invention. Most definitions of poverty emphasize deficiency. Such definitions only demonstrate the basic relativity of the concept and must be asked what is necessary and who determine necessities. This question was answered by the West. One problem that ties poverty became the defining characteristic of the third world. As more people can trust poverty to be eradicated through a modern economy, search for modes of life and social organizations based on simplicity or more forms of poverty were discredited. The alternative to anti-developmentism reject white supremacy by recognizing value and alternative ways of being. The K-Ticks first by abandoning the development project, which is constructing the entire concept of the third world as needing something. Gordon. Anti-developmentism emerges abandoning Western Eurocentrism or Euro-Americanism and identifying other visions, other ways of developing being, and for recognition of development that has been an illusion by challenging the central concepts that set boundaries on thinking and development could be exposed and rejected as degenerate, ecological, maladaptive, and an empty dream. Expressing analogy leads to transformative responses. The alternative is key to restore self-worth, agency, productive stability for foreign economies means the all self goal of the app better than they do. Gordon. It is important to have people view themselves as communities before development, a sense of inclusiveness, belief in local capabilities, and self-worth characterized communities. Even those communities were poor, it's not to romanticize and rather to acknowledge before development people were not helpless. Cut the cord at helpless. Framework. All of the dialogue must take into account the marginalized. Arrow 5. Explicit discussion of ethical which will lead formulation of ethical ideas which will lead to better results from marginalized and genuinely open dialogue is not predetermined outcome. Only a pseudo dialogue is a predetermined outcome where powerful participants can control the outcome in their favor. First, if the group is policy to harm the marginalized is brought to listen to the marginalized by process of sensitive identification, more willingness to adjust positions so as to favor the poor. Actually, skip the Duro card. The standard is to fight structural violence. Go in the F. Their framing is problematic. Double bind. Either the affirmative framework is concerned about issues of oppression, in which case the K impacts are relevant under the affirmative, and therefore you vote there, or the F has it excludes the impacts of the critique, which means it excludes and disregards issues of dehumanization, justifying violence. Prefer the NC framework for its non-ideal contextualization of how we value the material conditions of people. We tell you that policymaking is fine, but policymaking that doesn't account for and explicitly listen to the voices of the press will inevitably fail. Don't give her the world about it. The offense of policymaking is holistically possible under my standard. There's no reason to exclude other impacts. In addition, we say that the focus on policymaking is probably bad, or the question of like supporting nations. The education values from the standard still apply to the offense against the affirmative, even if I lose the shell. The plan text fails to produce any solvency over the framing. The prevention thesis merely allows life to continue, but does not foster international diplomacy or interaction. Terrorist interdarian miss internal links between stigma and security. Preventing death is not the same thing as securitization. Hold her to a better explanation of this warrant. In the K turns agonism. The less we value each other as equals interactions, we will never exist in safe otherizing interactions. Instead, we'll be a part of violent otherizing interactions until we begin to respect others. So Dower and the necessity of listening to voices who specifically need to be listened to is the only way we can ensure agonism. CX.
Okay. Alright, everybody ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's start. Okay, on your second shell, how do I violate?
So the argument is that you defend nations as states and governments providing aid to
okay, sure. So what
poor
am I,
nations.
what's the inter? What should I do instead?
The argument is that you should defend. You ought to defend nations as the actual definition, which is communal groups of people. So for example.
Okay, it's like a government, not a communal group of people.
No, it doesn't fit.
Why?
Okay, sure. So the argument is that governments are nations, but nations refers to a specific thing that are separate from that. So I'd say the definition.
Where?
Actually, I'm sorry. I misspoke. Nations are not the same as governments. Go to the Paul evidence, which tells you pretty clearly that nations are distinct because of A, the lack of sovereignty in some nations, i.e. nations is a term that encompasses more than just governments, whereas governments and states only encompass one thing.
Okay, that was pretty confusing.
Well, I think the Paul evidence is really clear. Nations is separate from states and governments. It's not
because
yeah, so the argument is that
some states don't have boundaries?
Right, so nations can go past boundaries, they cannot have boundaries, nations can have a state of their own. Like, for example, Tibetans are
so
like...
why does that... Okay, so...
So the reason why that's important is the critical education and advocacy skills standard.
Yeah, okay. Alright. On the K, so can you explain what the alt does?
Yeah, so the alternative rejects the concept of development as necessary to aid other nations, or development as necessary to come in and save these people from death, from destruction, as benevolent aid, right? We see people are just happen
So
to...
how do we reject that thought?
By not doing the affirmative, right? Because the affirmative
So
affirms that
rejecting
thought. So I would say the alternative is anti-developmentalism. That includes rejecting the affirmative.
Okay, so what else does it?
Yeah, so I think the alternative also goes further by specifically recognizing value in other forms of being. So not just reject the AF, but I would say it's reject any form of white supremacy and focus on value in alternative ways of being. So I don't know how white supremacy might come up. We just say we ought to reject it.
All right. Okay. What does the Dower 5 card do?
Yeah, so Dower indicates that any kind of dialogue about whether policy should be passed, any question of ethics, has to account for explicit inclusion of the marginalized or the poor.
Do I not do that?
No, because the affirmative framework pretty explicitly does not include any discussion of policy making in terms of assisting the poor. Or if it does,
why
so if the affirmative does encompass issues of oppression, then sure, that just means the K links into your framework too.
Okay, the K. Why does the K link in?
Because the K is just an impact of destroying the oppressed.
Doesn't the card just say that I have to include marginalized people?
Yeah, so the group whose policies are harming the marginalized has to explicitly be brought to listen to the marginalized. By a process of sensitive identification, there's more willingness to adjust the position so as to favor the poor.
Okay.
The idea is right, the poor are disadvantaged, we need to explicitly favor them in our construction of policies.
Okay, sure. Starting prep now. Not proud. 35, something like that.
Okay. Anything new?
Yeah. It's not like I don't have any cards.
Okay. Well, can you set the counter enter?
Yeah.
Or like whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry. How much time did you have left again?
35.
Okay.
So it's just at the end.
Okay.
Of the doc.
Is there like stuff you're not reading in the doc?
What do you mean?
Well, you said it's at the bottom of the doc.
Like everything I just added on is at the bottom.
Oh, well, can you just like send the stuff because my computer is like really shitty at loading like
Oh,
documents.
like just like in
Yeah.
the email or?
Just the
What
stuff
do you-
you're reading in the 1AR, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Yeah, like I don't need the AC
I mean,
again.
it's just like,
That's fine, whatever. I have it now.
I just sent like the inter. I can just like send that in. Oh wait, no, I am reading cards. Is it cool if I just put it in the email or?
Can you just make a document, please, with the stuff that you're reading in the 1AR without the AC?
Okay, sending it over.
Okay.
The order is going to be on the K, the first order's going to be K, first interp, and then the second interp, and then the AC. Everybody ready?
Hold on. K disclosure T F.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Hold on. I gotta get the doc up. Did you send it?
Oh, I think I did.
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, wait, check again.
There you go.
Okay, cool.
You should reply. All.
Oh no, she just sent this to me. I can forward it to you. Okay, I sent it.
Alright, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Alright.
Hold on.
Okay.
Yes.
Alright.
Your attempt to promote decolonization with the affirmative country may reentrench to settle colonialism, even if the negative Chuck and 12 state decolonization and these have been superficially adopted in indications of planning social justice decolonization wants something different. Settlers scholars talk about prior rights because there is little recognition given in the medium to how the context of settler colonialism inclusion is dangerous and how it domesticates decolonization. It is limiting in how it recapitulates dominate the dominant theories of social change when metaphor and basic decolonization kills the possibility of decolonization. Decolonization cannot be grounded in pre-existing frameworks even if they are critical. It's not the approximation of other experiences. Decolonization is not solvable for things that you want to improve. Solidarity is an uneasy, reserved, and unsettled matter that neither reconciles, prevents grievances nor forecloses future conflict. Decolonization through frameworks like debate, field status quo pedagogies, and other colonial and separable talking in 12 states. The United States operates in simultaneously with other colonial projects that lose include people of color from other colonial contexts. Decolonization would involve the seizing wealth by post-colonial subject integration into it on securing a share of settler appropriated wealth. Decolonization would probably because empire, settlement, and internal colony have no speech separation. These features make it a set of contradictory decolonial by design. Decolonization is a metaphor turns decolonization into an empty signifier. Decolonization is necessarily unsettling on the theory shelf. The AC is a K of theory. A debate is a constantly changing, always becoming starting conception of norms creation that insists on a single perfect model. Debate is flawed. Be reject universal moral rules is a denial of difference there. Fairness, better claims to empower everyone, but ends up also protecting those who only respond to novel arguments is theory, i.e. an affirmation of slave morality that causes the hatred of existence for debate, which controls the internal intent of their theory arguments. See, the embrace of difference is the key to a new model of community in which we don't reject anyone who disagrees with us, but rather engage in others' arguments, which are the key to independence and affirming the will of power. On the theory shelf disclosure. Counter-interpretation, the app discloses the plain text before the run. The enigma not forces the app to disclose their position. Standards. One, you heard small schools, A big schools will just have the means to prep out small school debaters even more efficiently by going through all the cards that they can constantly access. B, any small schools get from looking at big schools disclosure is inverted since schools know cards better and can beat them back quickly. C, schools that are large enough to not be harmed by disclosure already disclosed and this score was good. So basically, I'm like the only debater here from my school, and this is like the third tournament that I've traveled alone. So, and this is like, yeah. And turn their education impacts since people won't want to think on their feet. If you want to do research, then A, you can get the benefits of the run, and B, get it from some other activity. And also, there's no less reciprocity. You should put this. You choose to put this burden on you by disclosing it, and this discourages innovation. Since everyone will just cut cards, the best debaters will read, and that means that because we don't think on our feet, also we're just going to be reading cards but not actually engaging the arguments. That's going to be turning all their education impacts. Debate's supposed to be about being able to come up with arguments, not just not just generating arguments before the round of cards we don't even understand. That means internal link to all their education impacts. So on the research on the research, they talk about how it's better for research, but again, turn this argument because we want to have in-round thinking. That's always going to be a better link to education. Also, they talk about in class. She talks about how generics are bad. However, generics are better because we get to explore depth. That means always the internal link to education, and education is always going to outweigh fairness because it's the only unique thing that we get out of debate. On the second interp for nations, I definitely need this. He just says that nations aren't states because they have like boundaries, whereas states don't have boundaries or something. But the affirmative is definitely a nation, and I'm just saying developed nation. So it's not saying that the plan is implemented by the whoever the nation is in his interp. I never specify that a nation is completely different than whatever he applies. So I definitely meet that interp. On the AC, you can extend consequence 1 and 2 to talk about how internalism and externalism fails. That means that the only way that we can we can only use a constitutive, and that's the will of power, and that's only affirmed in through the AC.
Okay. I'm gonna take my 3:30 prep starting now. Do you make any RBI warrants?
Nope.
Okay. What is going to be an overview? You should flow that on the T debate. Then I'm going to go on just like AF and framework, and then the K. And then at the end, I'll do like the substance level disclosure. So overview, AF, K, and then the disclosure arguments. Okay, everyone ready? She doesn't make an RBI justification, which means any kind of arguments why like I'm winning substance or the concession of framework means you can just default vote like neg on substance. In addition, there's like massive concessions out of disclosure shell. She's conceding, so she doesn't like ask me in CX whether or not T in theory comes before substance. First, disclosure is encompassing of all issues. It's a question of how disadvantaged debaters are, or how debaters are disadvantaged in the aspects of out of the round, as well as value we get debating issues like substances in the first place, which means it's not contextualized specifically to this round or even a certain set of rounds. Disclosure is true for all rounds, both outside of debate and inside of debate, and her only arguments against theory and T are grounded in her framework, i.e. she's turning it under the will to power, but she concedes dour and literally just ignores all of the arguments against the framework of the AC, which means you look to our framework and disregard the will to power. Even if you believe that there are extensions out of the AF of the framework, she doesn't A, address the neg framework, or B, give a reason why her framework ought to come first, or why she doesn't do any comparative like analysis between these things, unlike the AF itself. Extend the prefer the NC framework for contextualizing policymaking in the sense of the poor, which means there's no reason to prefer her war of the ballot. Extend the standard of resisting structural violence. She does not extend any offense of the AC. There is no ballot story for the affirmative. There's no reason why you should prefer any of her arguments, especially when she's conceding defense that the prevention of diseases and the removal of stigmatization has no internal link to securitization. Some things are truly dangerous, but it doesn't mean we securitize against them in the same way their evidence says it does, i.e. Securitization is sort of a term of art in the sense that it refers to the kind of securitization that destroys the other, but securitization against things like death and diseases are not necessarily the same thing, or at least she is missing the internal link between those things. And she's conceding that the K terms her under her own framework. The less we value each other as equals in interactions means we'll never exist in safe otherizing interactions. Go to the K. She tries to read these tucking decolonization cards, but these arguments are completely true. Decolonization is a superficial project that completely failed. We don't advocate for decolonization in any single aspect of the K. You can control F it. It's not anywhere there. The alternative is anti-developmentalism, which is a completely separate issue. In addition, just because we cannot support decolonization doesn't mean we can not criticize and reduce colonization. Decolonization is a term of art. It doesn't mean the same thing as anti-colonialism, and decolonization is not the same thing as criticism of anti-colonialism. Decolonization is a specific term of art that refers to the period after colonization where nations pretended to try to break down the colonization that they'd once imposed. Also, you're conceding a ton of offense out of the K. Extend Gordon 1, which says development is constructed and tied to coloniality. Development strengthens white supremacy and universally is accepted as good because of Eurocentrism, which values other points of view. Extend Gordon 4, which says that, extend the alternative, which is anti-developmentalism and rejecting white supremacy and abandoning development, which she's conceding 100% solvency by conceding Gordon 5. They were able to recognize alternative forms of life and alternative forms of life that do not involve like constantly in the pursuit of perfection and advancement like the affirmative superimposes on these groups. In addition, she's conceding that the affirmative frames the other as needing aid, as needing assistance, and frames the like nations that are helping them as if they are just benevolently assisting a country that happens to be in danger. We say that the danger that these nations are in are from the very root of it, the problem created by colonialism in the first place, which is intrinsically tied to development. Extend Dower, which says all of the dialogue needs to account for the marginalized, explicitly discussing the marginalized, whereas she concedes that the affirmative does not identify this anywhere. All right, on to T. The planks of the intro clearly resolve any offensive or defensive claims. Extend the interpretation. At tournaments receiving an out of finals bid, debaters must on the page with their name and the school they attend disclose all previously read positions on the NDC wiki at least 30 minutes before the round. First, we do not force all people to disclose this. Some are at a necessary disadvantage. Debaters who can attend camps, travel to national octofinal bid tournaments are necessarily qualified to violate, i.e. the question is not whether or not you come from a small school. The point is that you have the resources and the ability to prep. Second, even if we contacted on Facebook, the Facebook conversation is right here. It was literally less than 10 minutes before the round. In addition, it was around that. I don't know exactly, but the point is that it was not at all sufficient to meet the interp. Second, it doesn't resolve. Also, the only thing she sent was A, the plan text, which literally just says research into diseases, which is not at all specific to resolve any of the offense that comes out of the shell. And A, that doesn't resolve academic integrity at all because it means I don't have any access to your evidence. And second, only minimally resolves clash. Disclosure obviously is a marginally superior interp, and she doesn't win an RBI, which means that there's no reason why, just because the act being slightly fair is any reason to prefer it. Our interpretation is clearly providing better offense under the same kind of standards that she is. Extend the standard of education, which is valuable because debate is an educational activity. If we weren't gaining education rounds, we wouldn't even have debate in the first place. 3, the abuse is massively magnified by the app. There are 2, she tries to claim that she's like the only LDer from her school, but there's also 2 LDers from my school, and like one of them is a novice, I'm the other one, she just started traveling to tournaments, so the like whole like sob story about that is also probably true to me. And you read the small school excuse, but you also can see the explicit preempt, which is that you are reading a Nietzsche framework and a specific plain text affirmative, and there is literally nothing on your wiki. There's not even contact info. I looked you up on Facebook, but what if a debater doesn't have a Facebook or something like that, right? These are issues that come up, and there's no warrant why out of round. So going to her show. She says it hurts small schools, but there's no one where out of round causes cards we don't understand. That presumes that like your coach is cutting cards. Debaters can write up analytics and prepare more arguments, i.e. there's no reason why we can't just come up with good arguments outside of round. And turn, being able to think more about an issue means we'll discover even more unique arguments to make, i.e. the more time we have to think about a specific plan, that means we'll probably come up with more arguments. This presumes the internal link that there is just like anytime you're prepping because of disclosure, you're like reading like block documents, which doesn't make any sense because like I don't do that and most debaters probably don't do that. So essentially, round breaks down pretty simply. She's continuing the framework, and the only offense that's extended is just like a framework card of the AC. So there's just not a ballot story there. There's not an RBI, so you can't vote for her on the like topicality debate, and the theory debate is like massively misinterpreted. She's conceding the interp, which also. The interp probably resolves it because of an octafinals bid. Insofar as you're traveling to an octafinals bid tournament and like attempting to win, right? At that point, you probably have the resources to participate in disclosure. It's a totally different story if you were just like a complete novice, but we can clearly tell, right, you're spreading, you're reading an app with good cards, like you went to VBI, we understand the point here.
Very cool. I'll take
35?
35 seconds left.
Is it okay if I get water? Sorry, I only have like 10 seconds. Can I get water? A second.
Order is going to be overview, the K, and then like T/theory.
Where should I flow the overview?
You probably don't need to flow it, but if you
that's
flow it, the K, I guess. All right, everybody ready? All right, start now. Overview of the round, I'm going to go hard for the K because he severely undercovers the cards, doesn't actually address them, and then I'm going to be talking about the K of theory, which he doesn't actually rebut, also doesn't depend on my framework. But let's go on to the K. First, extend the Tucking Union 12 card talks about how him trying to stop colonization or even critique colonization in the world means that he's just re-entrenching this colonialism. He says that he's the perm is anti-development, which doesn't link to the K, but just the fact that he's reading a colonialism K, it doesn't matter what the alt is because he's trying to prevent this in some way. Just proves that he's trying to commodify it for the round. You can turn this argument here, or you can turn this because it's a reason to vote for me because he's just re-entrenching. He's normalizing colonialism and to extend over a ton of impacts. He's just saying saying that we shouldn't take policy action, instead we should just focus on like the colonialism, and that means that like we should like vote negative for some reason. But realize that him even like reading this K is going to re-entrench settler colonialism, and that means you vote AF because he's just normalizing it in the debate space. And you can extend the Technique 12 card, which talk about specifically how the colony and status quo pedagogy like debate are inseparable. That means it's impossible for him to solve you can definitely like you can't look to all of anti-development because like the colony and the pets like this like spaces that we're in are inseparable. So I'm definitely winning the K there. He the only argument he makes is that he doesn't link, but he definitely does by just reading the K or just like critiquing any time of colonialism at all. But let's move on to the K of theory. He severely undercovers it. So we extend the first point that talks about how debate is constantly changing and always becoming. So that means that even if I don't win the framework, you still vote off of this because you reject all theory and topicality arguments, because since debate is always changing, we cannot set norms for debate. He says, also he talks about how disclosure comes first, theory comes first because it applies to all rounds, but because this is a K of theory, it makes sense to put it before theory because it is a K of theory. That means you always address this first. You can extend the second argument that talks about how moral rules are like universal rules are a denial of difference. That means that we're only rejecting things that are different from us, and that causes security, that causes us to fear the unknown, and that's a reason why you don't look towards his theory arguments. But also you can extend the third argument that talks about how we embracing models of difference in communities means that we are able to engage in arguments. So that means instead of engaging in the affirmative, instead of just making responses that he could have made, he decided to read like 2 shells on me and a K of the AC and didn't actually really engage with the AC. That means that the only way to actually resolve this is by voting for the affirmative, because we have a K of theory which talks about how him trying to reject or him trying to put norms on people is not in a community where we're able to engage. That means you always look to the K of theory first. So offense in the round, look to the K first. I'm definitely winning the K because the fact that he read the K is a link. And because he's re-entrenching settler colonialism, that means you always vote AF. But even then, the theory shells don't matter anymore because of the K of theory was severely undercovered. That means you don't look to the theory arguments.
close debate. I voted negative on this theory debate. I think the issue is like I don't understand what the impact to this critique of theory is that outweighs the F. So, or outweighs the neg, sorry. So like you're correct. I don't think the neg is a particularly great argument that is like universal rules to deny difference, and that sort of norms are not necessarily static, and in fact they do change. And in fact that there are models of difference, et cetera, et cetera. But why is that bad? And like this impact is just not super well articulated versus the negative, who, while needs to be pushing more directly into this K of theory, it's just like debate is an educational activity, and it is like sort of defined by clash. It is defined by good education, and like defined by debaters like having resources to debate each other and like and research interesting positions and learn new things. And that, to me, is something that I can directly relate to and have a clear articulated impact for, that I'm willing to sort of accept that despite the sort of inability to impose universal norms, and despite the ability, the risk that it perhaps risks denying difference, that I'd be willing to sort of sacrifice that for the sake of increasing education. Now, if this argument was articulated and was weighed more clearly against the next education impact, I'd be like, yeah, this is fair. Like, but the only terminal impact I have is that I have this articulated as like, we are able to engage in more arguments, and this seems to be the only terminal impact that you're going for. But if the neg is like also going for this engagement argument, and seems to be much more clearly articulating an internal link to this engagement argument, which is like the only way we can sort of engage in a productive and educational fashion is through focused research that comes through the wiki, then that seems to solve like the vast majority of this terminal impact that you're going for in the 2AR. If your argument is that disclosure locks us into sort of repetitive debates or debates that are one-sided because of big schools, or if your argument is like that disclosure forces us to reveal like positions that sort of can't be articulated through the wiki and that like leads to bad debates or something like that, and have like an engagement impact that is clearly weighed against the app, then sure. Or against the neg, then sure. This is something I could be willing to bet on. The development K, so this is interesting. I don't really know which direction this link flows. Does tuck and yang link to the neg? I don't really know. I'd say the one thing that I change it is that you're just sort of you're sort of just taglining something in the 2AR, which is like, you're just like, you re-entrench colonialism because the alt's anti-colonialism, and this is the reason to vote for me because you normalize colonialism, but never really explain the reasoning why. And like, in order to get the warrant, have to go back through and like read these cards about like the metaphor arguments and like the arguments about debate as a unique space. To,
so is it like why he links, or why like it's bad?
Yeah, well,
that I didn't explain.
Well, why he links?
Okay.
Yeah, like this link. That's like why I'm troubled about this link question, because I was like, but why does the average?
I have a question. So, did you buy the like decolonization is like separate from issues of like anti-colonialism or anti-developmentalism? Like it's a term of art that specifically refers to like the period after.
Yeah, I think that this argument makes some sense. Like I don't really know that much about what tuck and yang says, but it does seem like
they're distinct.
Yeah, right, because it even says the underlying parts of the cards, like decolonization, which we assert is a distinct project from other sort of social justice projects. And it talks about sort of decolonization in different contexts, and I would guess the neg alternative is, which is just like, the neg because anti-developmentalism or whatever. It doesn't seem to be exactly the same thing that these tuck and yang cards say. I could be convinced that they are, I just need more explanation. Overall, I'd say that the sort of 2AR strategy was fine. I would have probably just sat all in on this K of theory because they consider it as the highest layer, so I'd just be like, all right, this is going to be it. And that would give you more time to do the weighing and impact comparison.
What do you think I should have done in 1AR? Like, what would have been a good strategy?
I think the general overall strategy wasn't bad, but the inefficiencies that were caused by like just randomly slowing down and responding to shells traded off with the ability to make more arguments that could make this 2AR a lot easier for you. Like, for example, like I don't know why you don't at least extend some of the defense to the theory shell. Like that does mitigate their ability to say like we have this huge education argument. You're like, here's some defense to that, and that makes it a lot easier for you to be like my K theory outweighs.
I have a question. How do you think I should reply to like the small school argument, or that like?
I mean, like I don't know. Like I have like a lot of thoughts about this. I like wrote like a kind of bad article about it a while ago on Premier Debate, which was just like, I don't think the small school argument is super convincing.
Let me ask you, I guess, a separate argument. How do you think I could have better handled responses to like the K of T argument? Because I guess like in the 1AR, I just didn't. I think it was like contextualized sort of. I think I just messed up flowing, but like I didn't get the like rules are bad in the sense of like this almost like Deleuze-esque argument, right? How do you think I could have handled that flow better?
I think minimally in cross-sex you should have been like, what's the terminal impact of this game?
Yeah.
That makes it easier for you to swing against it. You should just like identify what it says and just say the opposite of it to some degree. So they're like, norms impossible, and you're like, norms.
Yeah, I can
good.
get that part.
They say some stuff about like universal rules denying difference, and you're like, the interp solves that better. Something like that.
Okay. Thanks.
But like, you just gotta like identify things, say the opposite of what the sense.